My name is Victoria Hannon and I'm the author of Kokomo, which is out now. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about my reading habits. So I like to read pretty much anywhere and everywhere that I can. I'm a big fan of stealing little moments throughout the day to just open a book. Whenever I used to be allowed out of the house, I would always have a book on me in case I was early. I'm always early. And I would just use that time to read a little bit. I'm also a big fan of reading in the morning, so I'll make my coffee and then take it back to bed and then spend the first 45 minutes or hour of the day reading in bed instead of reading the news or scrolling through my phone. And I find that the days that I do that, I end up feeling a lot better than the days that I have started the day with doom scrolling. I think the first book that I fell in love with as an adult was probably A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. I don't know if it's very cool to like Dave Eggers anymore, but I think one of the things that he really did for me is made me realize that there's no right or wrong way to write something, and there's no right or wrong voice to write it in. I remember reading A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius and also some of his short fiction for the first time, and just my mind was blown about the kinds of things that you can write about and the ways that you can write about them. I think when I was at school and also even at university, I was pretty much taught that there was one way to do things, and it was very nice to have my eyes opened to realize that there were so many other ways to do it. And I think that really set me on the path to writing more of my own fiction, because I didn't feel so bogged down in the ways that I'd been taught. Reading is very important to me. I love to do it and I love talking about books. It's one of my favorite topics, and the minute I get started I find it hard to stop recommending books to people. But also reading is now a very important part of my job. I think reading makes you a much better writer, particularly reading a diverse range of voices and stories. But also, even if you're not a writer, I think reading widely can really help you develop empathy for lots of different people, and also get a better understanding of the way the world works. I think I have two ideal reading experiences. The first one is to show up early when you're meant to meet someone at a bar or a pub and get a drink and just sit alone and read for an hour. I also really love when you're away for a weekend with a group of friends and you've had a big day of going out for a walk or a swim or some kind of activity, and then everyone comes back to the house and someone opens some wine and you all sit around a fire or out in the sun and just spend the afternoon reading your books until it's time to have dinner. So lovely about that feeling of all sitting around in a room, not talking to each other but not being alone either. I have been really struggling to read during lockdown. I find that my concentration is not as good as it normally is. There have been a few books which have managed to grab my attention. I really loved The Mother Fault by Kate Mildenhall, which is the story of a mother doing everything that she can to save her children. It's kind of set in a near future, and I would call it, I guess, a climate change thriller. I also read The Safe Place by Anna Downs very quickly. I thought that was just an incredibly fast-paced thriller set in the south of France, and maybe again I was romanticizing the outside world, but it had a sort of dreamy / nightmarish quality to it that I really enjoyed. And also The Adversary by Ronnie Scott, who's a Melbourne writer, and that is sort of set in this one long, hot, dreamy summer in Melbourne where they go to parties and clubs and pools, and yeah, it really made me miss the outside world. But there's something very unique about the voice that Ronnie writes that book in that I was jealous of but also really loved. I think writing a novel has had a big impact on the way that I read. I will often find myself reading something and wondering how the writer has done it, and so often if I love something I will finish reading it and I'll go back to the start and make notes as I reread. I did that with Commonwealth by Anne Patchett, which I think is an incredible book. The plot and the structure of it just blew my mind, and she has this incredible ability to put you into a flashback without you even realizing that you're in it. And so I reread that book and made notes about the structure as I went. So it can be very hard to read purely for pleasure, but then if you do find something that you really love, you become immersed in it, and you only kind of come out at the end of it and think, how the hell did they do that? And so that's when I have to go back and kind of relook and study. I don't know if there is one book or one author that has changed me as a reader or writer, but I do think that my reading has changed as I've got older. I did used to kind of exclusively read a lot of books by white men, particularly American white men, and I think I got a bit bored with it and started to wonder why I was struggling to connect with some of these stories, and that was when I kind of did an audit, I guess, of my reading habits and realized how exclusively white and Western my reading was. And so I made a really concerted effort over many years to read more women and to read writers of colour and lots of different sexualities and genders. And I think the more widely you read, the better your writing, and I think just the more interesting writer you become and more interesting person you become, because you have more empathy and you have more understanding of different people's perspectives and different people's stories. I have about 5,000 authors that I admire, and we'll probably be here all day if I tell you all of them. But I really love Anne Patchett. I think Commonwealth is an incredible book. The plot, the characterization, the sibling relationships in that book are so interesting to me, because I feel like you very rarely see that kind of dynamic between sibling characters, and I thought the way she explored that was very fascinating. I also loved The Dutch House. One of the details that I read about in an interview with her was about how she never really described the house. It's like the house is a character in this book, but when you go back to read it, the details of the house are so scant throughout the book that she's really left it up to the reader to kind of design the house in their own mind. And I thought that was really an interesting choice for a book that is really set in this house and is named after this house. I love Elizabeth Strout and the way that she writes her characters with sympathy, but also a kind of no holds barred approach. Like if her characters are being awful, like Olive Kitteridge, for example, she just lets them be awful. And sometimes there are no consequences to that. And I think that's quite true to real life. And so I really admire her characterization. I think On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong is sort of mind-blowing in the fact that it's his debut novel. Obviously he's an award-winning poet, but I just think the prose in that book is some of the most beautiful prose I have ever read. And I remember just every so often reading it. I was on a train actually in upstate New York, and I remember this one point where I read this beautiful sentence and I had to close the book and cry for a minute before I could reopen it again, just because it was so stunningly beautiful. What else? I love The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I think that's an incredibly brave book that shouldn't work, but it does. The Animators by Kylie Rae Whitaker, which I think is a very sorely underread book, and I've been talking about it a lot lately because I feel like everyone should read it. I think the energy in that book is really something, and I was actually reading that when I wrote Kokomo, and I remember finishing it and just wanting to emulate that energy that she had between her characters and in her writing. I think it's really wonderful. So I am currently reading about 15 books. My concentration has been very bad throughout lockdown, and I'm finding it hard to get stuck into things. Yesterday I did start reading Real Life by Brandon Taylor, who is an American writer. This is kind of being touted as like a new campus novel, It's set in a university in the Midwest, and the character of Wallace in this book is a young black man, and he's the only black person in his entire course, and so he's kind of navigating a very white institution as a gay person of colour. And so far the writing is very funny and very dry, and I'm really enjoying it. And actually it does remind me a little of The Adversary by Ronnie Scott. There's a similar tone in there that I really enjoy. And so I'm managing to read that. I've also got The Details by Tegan Bennett Daylight, a few Vivian Gornick's on my bedside table, and just a million other brilliant books that have come out this year that I haven't managed to get stuck into yet. What's next for me? I am 2 drafts into my second novel. It's called Marshmallow, and it's about 5 friends who witness the tragic death of a young child, and it's about how grief ripples through their lives and impacts their relationships. There are some funny bits in it, I promise. It's not completely dark and sad the whole way through. That is due in, I have to finish that by April next year, so hopefully you'll have it in your hands maybe in early 2022. Thank you for spending some time with me talking about my reading habits. Hopefully you'll all pick up my debut novel Kokomo. Thank you.